Hello and welcome to the Bible and Beyond podcast from early Christian texts. We explore historical and spiritual questions about Jesus, gender, women, salvation, healing, and the meaning of life. Shirley Paulson is hosting a series of conversations with scholars who are able to unlock mysteries from extra-canonical books, forgotten scriptures, so-called Gnostic Gospels, and the Bible. Thanks to a generous AAR, Loose Advancing Public Scholarship grant, we are now offering a completely free online course titled Introducing Nag Hammadi and Related Texts. In 24 video lectures, you'll gain a fundamental understanding of recently discovered texts written by early Jesus followers. Just visit bibleandbeyond.courses to enroll. And now, here's Shirley Paulson.
I think we're in for a fascinating conversation right now. Our guest today is Dr. David Frankfurter, a leading scholar on the study of ancient magic. For people who might be wondering why we're talking about magic when our focus is on the Bible and beyond, let me say that this subject opens up an important window on the daily life and attitudes of most people in antiquity, including Jews and followers of Jesus. We'll talk about what that means in just a moment. So first, let me introduce you to Professor Frankfurter. He's a professor at Boston University and holds the William Goodwin Aurelio Chair of the Appreciation of Scripture there. He specializes in Jewish and Christian apocalyptic literature and magical texts. His particular interests revolve around theoretical issues like the place of magic in religion and the relationship of religion and violence. He has many significant publications, and the one we're drawing from today is his big guide to the study of ancient magic. We won't be able to cover all 800 pages right now, but we'll get started. It's a really fun subject, but a thought-provoking one too. So thank you so much for being with us today, David.
Sure. I'm very happy to be here.
All right, so I think we really ought to start with whatever connection there might have been between Jesus and magic. Were there some people who maybe have thought of him as a practitioner of magic in some way? What's the connection with Jesus? We should go there first.
Well, there were many people back in the first and second and third centuries and afterwards who did think that Jesus would have been a Magos, that is to say, an exotic practitioner, a person who knew spells, a person who knew how to heal using various substances. They would focus on the fact that he was Jewish, and so that would make him exotic. And they would also focus on some of the stories that he had knowledge of secret or foreign incantations to heal. For example, Gospel of Mark is one of the best resources for this. He uses Aramaic phrases when he is healing a person who is blind and deaf, or deaf and dumb. He says Ephphatha, and the gospel writer translates it into Greek, and that it means be opened. But of course, what's important for the author and for the early readers was that there was this Aramaic phrase that would function differently from just plain Greek. And then there's another place where he says Talitha Kumi, which is little girl, rise up. And here they also give the Greek translation. So Jesus is known as a person who can use his hands in different ways, who has energy that can come out of him, a woman who has a 12 years flow and feels an energy coming out of him when she touches his garment. And he knows these Aramaic phrases. So he would very much fit the model of a Magos, a healing Magos in antiquity.
Wow. Okay. This is stretching us a little bit here. I think we might need some help with the word magic then. I mean, like, this isn't like a magician who comes to our kids' magic shows, right?
No.
What are we talking about? What does this mean?
No, magic magic and magician are our modern terms, and we really think about a magician today as somebody who does what we call show magic. They do use cards, and they do tricks that amaze us and seem impossible scientifically, but they make us feel when we're watching a magic show like there's more to the world than just rational activities. But this word magic and magician, these words translate Greek words and Latin words, magia or mageia. And I'll just I'll leave it with that. But mageia had a very different meaning in antiquity. It overlaps a little bit, but it would mean a form of exotic ritual activity using substances like stones or herbs or dolls of various sorts. It would involve foreign words that would call upon forces in the universe, ambiguous forces, or maybe good forces, or maybe bad forces. Jesus, for example, calls upon powers of angels and God. And a magos, of course, is not a magician, and it really is not well translated as magician. Magos really is an exotic figure, a foreign figure who knows ritual activities from another land. I've heard it best translated as a swami. This is a kind of a 1960s or 1970s translation to give it a very exotic Orientalist picture. So, for example, the three quote unquote wise men who come to visit the baby Jesus right after he's born are magoi. They're magoi from Babylon. And what's important about them is that they are able, using their exotic forms, foreign forms of astrology, they're able to find out that Jesus was born, that this Son of God was born way off in Palestine. And so they travel all the way there. But the point is that they travel from far off lands. They're not part of Judaism. They don't know what a Messiah is. But they do have very, very strong forms of astrology. That's how they discover about Jesus. So they're magoi.
Wow. Okay. So magoi is a new word for us too, and magic. Well, so you're giving us some interesting examples as to what kinds of tools they use to do this. Do you think that it actually worked? I mean, like, how did they do it? What did it look like?
Well, in healing, if we just kind of focus on that, it's a combination of touching and of the application of substances. This is what we get from Jesus. And also words and sounds and incantations that make the sufferer and the other people in the room feel that other forces are being called upon in an effective way. So it's not just, does it work scientifically, as if, giving someone an aspirin or giving someone a particular medication where it works scientifically. This works on the entire environment of healing. So, and the people in the room, the parents, the observers, the other people, they want to know that this person is confident and knows how to perform a healing. And knowing exotic phrases from Hebrew or from Aramaic or from Babylonian or from Egyptian, these kinds of phrases and incantations give people that sense of confidence.
My goodness. exotic gives you confidence. That's an interesting way to look at this. So going back to that question about did it work or not, I understand that this is not a medical science, but is there evidence that, I mean, besides the stories we read in the New Testament, is there evidence that these things worked? Were people healed this way?
Well, there's evidence from modern ethnography when anthropologists sit in on healing episodes, healing seances, for example, often accompanied by music and by poetry and by long incantations. They can see how it works, but very often the illnesses that are observed by anthropologists are illnesses that are very, very specific to the kind of healing that's being offered to them. So Jesus is credited with performing healings of things that we would really not view as very easily healed using these kinds of techniques. Like if you're blind, you're kind of blind, and if you can't speak, so also that. And if you're dead, you're dead. Resurrection is very difficult to accomplish unless the person's not actually dead. But this is where the gospel writers are really pushing his powers. They're saying, he didn't only heal people from malevolent demons. He also healed people who had the kinds of illnesses and situations and bodily misfortunes that nobody else would be able to heal.
Okay, so he's a healer in the context of the way the Magoi thing is working exotic, but he's also special because he's dealing with things that nobody else is dealing with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we understand that the Gospels in the New Testament are what scholars would call propaganda for Jesus's power. And so, of course, they're going to push his powers, and the book of Acts will push the powers of the apostles. They're not documentary materials. They're not like newspaper articles. They are saying this guy or these people are more powerful than any other healers out there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's go back into the way it's happening here. Several of us have been reading the books from Nag Hammadi and other extra canonical works, and in them, we often find some kind of, it looks like a prayer with long lists of vowels, and they just don't make any sense to us when we try to read them. Does this have anything to do with these sounds you're talking about?
Yes. The vowels were revered in Greek culture. They were viewed as very, very special because it was really the only language, Greek, that had vowels. Other languages like Hebrew and Egyptian had, what would we say, places where you would put a vowel-like sound, but you didn't really know what the sound would be. And there were 7 vowels, and of course, 7 in many cultures was a sacred number. So people at a very early point, probably about 500 BCE or earlier, they started thinking the 7ness of the vowels must correspond to 7ness in the heavens. So 7 heavens or 7 types of 7 planets or 7 spirits. Each one of those vowels was viewed as having a particular power. So when you have what we call vowel strings, and there's not only in Nag Hammadi, but they're also in the Greek magical formularies that we have many papyri of. When you pronounce these vowels, you are accessing the powers of the planets, the powers of the angels, the powers of the heavens, and they become quite powerful. So you can't have vowels in Hebrew or very easily in Egyptian. You need to have the Greek or sometimes Latin for the vowels.
So then, am I hearing you right that Greek then was an important part of this kind of healing ritual? The language itself is really important then.
Yes, yes,
Oh my goodness. Okay.
yes. And Greek, of course, has more vowels than we do. So that makes it even more complicated, but it kind of guarantees that there are 7 of them.
So let me just get this straight. So if they're speaking Greek, to be exotic, they have to have another language, but Greek is the one that has the vowels.
Yes, yes.
Right?
So you can say, we are speaking in an ancient Egyptian dialect, and we are going to pronounce the vowels in the way the Egyptians do. But of course, you're making up that Egyptians would have 7 vowels.
I see. Okay.
You're
Okay.
just putting the Egyptian stamp on your Greek incantation.
Oh boy. All right. So I tell you what, we're going to take a little break right here, and we're going to come back and ask you some more about these unusual practices.
If you enjoy our Bible and Beyond podcasts, we hope you'll consider becoming a sponsor by joining our Patreon community. Your affordable monthly contribution entitles you to exclusive content, discounts on our live online hybrid courses, Bible and Beyond gear, and invitations to online get-togethers with other supporters. Go to patreon.com/Bible and Beyond to join at a level that's right for you.
All right. Now, would you say that there was then force in this act of speaking, or the thought that produces the speech? Like you've been talking about the power that they're showing us in Jesus and the apostles. Is the act of speaking itself something that has any power in it?
Well, there are different forms of speaking, and I think that there's a power in saying words and incantations that people can't understand. So if I stand in front of a group and I say abracadabra, hocus pocus, or something like this, and I go on for 15 minutes, and you don't think I'm crazy, then you may well think like he's calling on powers from in a different language, and you will find it will be very efficacious. I'm not quite sure how it will be efficacious. It kind of depends what else I'm doing when I'm actually pronouncing these words. I might interpose with that magical language commands or invocations. And I might say, have a list of a series of names that sound like divine names, like Yahweh. And Yahweh is a very, very popular form of the Jewish God's name. Yahweh. So you might call upon Yahweh. You might call upon angels. So I'm to make a truly efficacious incantation, you would have nonsensical words, and then you might have recognizable names of gods and spirits, and then you might also have directing language like, let the spirit come out of this little child. So you'd have a combination of these different types of speech, and this would create a much more effective form of incantation, let's say.
So like when we read in the Bible, when it says things like, in the name of Jesus, something, that's that kind of power in the speech. Is that
exactly? Yes. And they say in the name of Jesus, and there, of course, Jesus is a name. It's a healing name. It's when you say in the name of Jesus, you're not saying, remember that guy Jesus who died on the cross or was born in Bethlehem or something like that. It's the name Jesus, which has this special power. So there are other names that are also very, very powerful that people use.
Like what? Can you give another example?
Well, let's see. There was the name. This doesn't show up in the New Testament, but the name of Horus, the god, the Egyptian god,
Okay, right.
Hor, and sometimes the name of the goddess Isis,
Okay.
and sometimes the name of the goddess Hecate. All these names might feed into a string of names that would be very, very powerful.
Well, you're raising another question here that's important for me to think about. Them, you're seems like you're blending the culture of calling on names from one religion to another. And I guess those of us who've been reading the Bible tend to think it's only Jesus who did this way and everybody else is different. But this is an interesting concept to think about, the Jesus culture fitting in with the other cultures this way.
I think this is an important aspect, partly because for most people in antiquity, not the readers of the Gospels, but most people, it was a multicultural world, and there were different cultures and different religions and different texts and different priesthoods all had different powers, and you want to bring them all to bear, especially if you have somebody who's very ill or you have a situation that's very dire. But I would say that again, I'm thinking about the Gospel of Mark, which is generally viewed as the earliest one, and you have this one very strange episode at the beginning where people are saying that Jesus is expelling demons by appeal to another spirit, Beelzebul. And then the question is he actually, as many people would do, when they cast out spirits, when they did exorcisms, appeal to a higher authority, and this higher authority would be this local god of Palestine called Beelzebul. And there's a very complicated discussion there, and I've read a lot of scholarship on this one little passage and how the different layers in it. But there's an example that for many people, it would have made complete sense that Jesus's power in expelling spirits came from another god. And they wouldn't see that as like a God that is opposed to the God of Israel, but simply a subsidiary spirit.
All right, that certainly changes a picture of that story too. Yeah, very interesting. So I know that a lot of these ritual magic spells have been collected from antiquity, from several different kinds of religious sources. What kinds of spells do people say? Like, if we're familiar with the New Testament and what Jesus is healing or expelling, what other kinds of spells were they talking about? What do people want in their spells?
Well, the many of the formularies, the cookbooks or collections we have for these spells and incantations have to do with what we would call divination. That is, learning what the gods want, learning what the spirits can tell you about different things taking place in this world. And this is what we call divination. And divination is a very basic form of religion all across the world, even today. Especially in China and in India and in the Middle East, people want to know, should they make a trip, or why is it that my child is sick, or something like that. And divination is figuring out a traditional way, or mastering a traditional way of appealing to spirits or gods that will give you that information. So there are many of these spells in the Greek formularies that give you ways using mirrors or using forms of purification, self-purification, and using various objects to call upon spirits to find out what is going on. And then there are other spells. There are very few healing spells in these particular formularies, but there are other ones which are meant to bind somebody else, to bind a person who is getting in your way, or to bind a young woman who you have a desire for.
Oh no!
or to bind a person who, let's say, might be trying to control you or to take you to court, something like that. You want to bind their tongue. You want to keep them from speaking against you. So this is also a very common form of what people call ancient magic. Binding.
Oh dear, this is very sad news. So, so who's deciding when your person who has these powers is doing a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, you just have to know. I mean, wow.
Well, the thing is that the world is full of competition and full of situations that could be quite tense, can destroy your life. And how do you manage these situations in a very small village or a small town? Or if you feel like you're going to be hauled into court and this rich man is going to try to take all your money and your land, what recourse do you have to deal with a situation like that? And this is where people will try to say, I didn't do anything, I'm innocent. But sometimes, just because you want to do everything possible, you also might get a binding spell put on the person who is accusing you, just as one additional thing. I should also say, in terms of these what we call erotic binding spells, that in a small society with in the Middle East, you don't date. There's no dating.
Okay.
There's no growing up with a young lady and learning about her and meeting in a kind of nice kind of egalitarian way. No, there's not. The parents decide who's going to marry whom. And what if you have a deep desire for a particular person and you don't have any power to say, oh, let's go to the river and look at the boats or something like that. That opportunity is frowned upon completely. Wow. So it's in situations where men especially have desires that they would love to, I'd love to have this, I'd love to kind of, get together with this girl. And this is when they would use a binding spell to try to kind of advantage themselves in meeting the girl or extracting her from the household or something like that.
Well, actually, that's very helpful to hear that, because we can relate to that in the sense that we do have those kinds of feelings and we just handle them differently today than they would have then. So I think that does help us to get a feel for. They weren't just being weird. They weren't just practicing things that were bizarre, but they were dealing with life issues. And I think probably that's the most important thing I think we're hearing from you, is that this concept of magic seems so foreign and so alien to us, but you're dealing with people who have real feelings and real issues that they were confronted with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So I have to just ask you then, this leads me to another question. I just want to clear up here. How does this magic thing fit with religion then? I mean, religion feels like it's a kind of a sacred thing with God, and I pray and I go to church and I worship and all those things, but this seems like an odd kind of connection. Can you help me with that?
It seems like an odd application, but we have to remember that words like religion are our words, and words like magic are ultimately our words. And in some ways, it's absurd that the word magic would cover an erotic binding spell and a healing spell and a divination spell. And it really shouldn't. And this is one of the reasons I don't really like the word magic at all. But I can say that these types of activities, these incantations and use of vowels and touching and casting out spirits, they all fit inside religion. If we look at religion not in terms of belief and not in terms of faith and not in terms of worshiping the one true God, but rather people trying to figure out what kinds of powers are out there, trying to use the language that they'd heard in the synagogue or in the church and try to use that for something else, but also trying to figure out how to deal with really desperate situations in their own lives. And that could be a handicapped child or a death or a spirit possession or any kinds of things like that. People want to draw on the religious traditions and materials that they see in ceremonial circumstances, and they want to use those to address their own situations. So sometimes people say that it's not really magic, but more a kind of personalized form of religion or personalized practical application of religion. But then, in a way, we're saying that religion is only what the priests and the rabbis do, and that doesn't seem correct either. Those of us who study religion would tend to say that religion covers everything from the home to the binding spell to the synagogue to the sacred tree, that everything counts as religion in one form or another.
Wow. I really appreciate this conversation because I had not really thought about the difference between an individual experience in religion and the collective experience and why that really matters. Because as individuals, we have deep feelings and deep caring about things. And so, of course, we're looking for answers. And if we're desperate, we look anywhere. And so I can see why the people were responding in ways that they're best ways they had to help people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for coming to be with us today. This has been such a helpful conversation. I'm glad you could take us beyond the standoffish kind of word magic. I see why you don't like to use that word to explain it, because it doesn't give the feel, the inside feel the way we should have it. But boy, I appreciate this, and I expect that our listeners are going to learn much more about this subject because it's a fascinating one. And if they want to find this nice, great big book, it's called Guide to the Study of Ancient Magic, which covers more than just the Jews and the Christians, but the whole kind of world there. So thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely. Absolutely glad to be here.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us today. Be sure to check out the details from this episode by accessing the show notes on our website, earlychristiantext.com/podcasts. Or just come browse around the website to find loads of other content, including blog posts, articles, online courses, our monthly discussion series, and more. We hope you'll consider supporting the work of producing online resources related to the incredible records left behind by the earliest followers of Jesus. You can become a supporting member by joining our Patreon community at patreon.com/BibleandBeyond. We love hearing from you on social media. Find us on Facebook, X, and YouTube by searching for Early Christian Texts. We'll catch you on our next episode of the Bible and Beyond podcast.